All right, welcome into the Hoist the Colors podcast. It is Monday night. I always feel like, for whatever reason, I always buffer at the beginning with my crappy Mac, which will be replaced by the time I return for our next show. But, guys, we have another ECU sweep to recap. The Pirates are 19-5. They have swept another series. It is our ECU baseball roundtable. Scott Lorbatcher has come up with an even better names, which we'll get to in a second. Jonathan Wagner and he are alongside. I'm Stephen Igo, the host. As always, like, subscribe, comment, hit the notifications bell. Do all that right now. And that way you can get notified every time we go live, whether it be the ECU baseball roundtable or whatever. What do you want to call this again, Scott?
Bucks on the Pond.
Bucks on the Pond. Very fitting for how the ECU baseball season has gone, especially in the midweek. I mean, if we did a midweek podcast specifically, we would do that. Chuck says, "Are we live?" Yeah, we are live, Chuck. If you got questions, drop them. What is going on in the comment section right now? Is that? Are we getting like actual emojis?
I think those are emojis, and they're coming through as descriptions of what the emoji is.
You know, I kind of prefer it that way. I like the descriptions.
Smiling to you as well, Sterling Comfer.
Yeah, thanks, Sterling Comfer. Are you the brother of Jeff Comfer? TJ Dunn asked, do we have another little IGO running around yet? We do not. So we'll address that at the top. So Thursday is when we're scheduled to go to the hospital for the induction process. So more than likely, I will say definitely likely, I will not be here next Monday. I think we're going to have to put the live stream on hold at least 1 week. The plan right now, barring some changes, is for Scott Lorbatcher and Jonathan Wagner to host the show next week, probably in podcast form. There's a lot of moving parts with the live stream. They could do it. I just honestly don't feel like walking them through each part. And maybe we'll find a way to do that before I go to the hospital. But there's just a lot going on right now. So that's the plan. And then we'll see on the week after that. But either way, we'll have some form of the podcast. Obviously, we want to go live because that is the best part about this, the interaction, et cetera. But as always, drop your comments. We'll keep them. We'll keep the questions, comments, all that involved in the show throughout the show. Chuck wants to know, is it another boy? No, it is a girl. So we're going to have one boy, one girl, and looking forward to it. And I'm sure we'll be sharing bunches of pictures doesn't sound right. We'll be sharing a lot of pictures. I already got the Hoist the Colors onesie ready to go again, so we'll have that out. But enough about the IGO family. Wags, we got another sweep to talk about. 3-1 is the week. Once again, Pirates lose in the midweek, come back, win all the games on the weekend. We'll get into kind of the big picture stuff here in a second, but what did you think of the Pirates weekend over George Mason?
Yeah, I think the midweek game was really a traditional midweek type of game, I think. And you know, with the ejections afterwards and not having Josh Moylan, I think it kind of put the team into, you know, a next man up mentality kind of over the weekend. I thought Cam Collins did a fine job. And, I mean, really just an all-around solid weekend. Pitching was really good. The bats were good over the weekend. Defense was spectacular all weekend long. So all around, it was a really good weekend, and you can't really ask for a better way to launch yourself into conference play.
Scott, your take the week that was, I know we talked how important last week's Campbell game was going to be. Another frustrating midweek loss, but I guess it is at least easier to get over when they keep kicking ass on the weekend.
Yeah, I was actually able to get out to Clark LeClaire on Saturday. It was a beautiful day for baseball. You know, just a great time to be out there and watch a game. And enjoy the weekend. Shout out to Chandler Honeycutt because I got to see him out there and talk to him for the first time in person. Super fan of the show, Chandler. Super fan of our show, and I'm a super fan of his. So that was really cool. You know, story of the week, again, was the midweek, you know, losing that and leaving 11 runners on base. We're leaving over 10 a game on base during the midweeks, and that includes, 4 games we've lost by a run. So, I mean, you know, obviously that's not great. But in the weekend, it was pitching and defense. I mean, it's been the offense a lot on Sundays, and this week it was Josh Groves really just shoving for 8 innings and locking down a George Mason team that I thought played really good defense themselves.
All right, we got our first question. As always, drop your questions, whether it be Facebook, YouTube. Again, if you're watching on Twitter, I don't think we get the comments here, so definitely go to Facebook or YouTube so we can get the questions up. Dave Englert wants to know, hard to understand how the polls handle our Campbell losses. What would we be ranked if we beat Campbell twice? I think is what he's trying to ask. That's a legitimate question. I will say, guys, our podcast last week 100% worked. Kendall Rogers texted me, said that we swayed their opinion. Aaron Fitt as well. So we got the Pirates moved up in the polls this week as a result of last week's controversial headline. But Scott, we'll go to you. You're our poll master. You're our Joe Lenardi of the Hoist the Colors podcast, bracketologist. The Campbell games, midweek games, but games against a top 15 team at this point. How much would it have changed ECU standing right now, even if they were 1-1 or 2-0 against the Camels?
Yeah, so that would make us 21-3 instead of 19-5.
Yep.
Maybe we're ahead of Stanford, maybe not. I don't think it changes a whole lot. I mean, I think it does legitimize us a little bit more. If we were 4-0 and 3-1 or 3-1 against the top 15. But we've had two really close competitive losses. Both of them weren't at home. I think does factor in. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we would be ranked any higher. I mean, I think if they were going to put Stanford behind us, based off of the seasons both schools were having right now, they would have already done it. Honestly, I was surprised we were at 8 and not 9 because I thought South Carolina would jump us. And I think that if South Carolina continues to win, they will jump us. And honestly, I wouldn't be offended by that at all either. South Carolina's – they have 2 losses. They're starting to sweep teams in the SEC. And if you look at their coming weeks, they're playing like LSU and Arkansas and Florida. So, if they continue to win, they'll have earned it. So I wouldn't be too offended if that does happen. But, yeah, I don't know that the Campbell losses have truly affected us as much as that midweek loss to Duke did, to be honest with you. That dropped us from 8 to 12 because then that weekend we went 2-1. We ended up on a 2-2 week. We slipped 4 spots, and it's taken us this long to make that ground back up just simply because we don't have – we had one in UNC, a marquee series to play. But, yeah, I don't know that beating Campbell twice would affect us very much at all, to answer your question.
Josh Hill says if we beat Campbell both games, Wake would be ranked number 1. So do we have to give credit to the Demon Deacons this week, guys, because they actually did sweep a good team, or at least what appears to be a good team? Is it time for us to turn the page and become Demon Deacon bandwagoners?
I think it's time.
They're no longer Fake Forest or Wake Forest. They're the real deal now. They're real Forest. Yeah, I mean,
progress. I like that.
Miami can definitely hit, and they shut them down all weekend. Wake Forest plays good defense at home, but they don't play good defense on dirt, which is interesting to me. I think seeing what they do when they have to go on the road and play on dirt and grass instead of a children's playground surface, be interesting to see what they do. But they're a legitimate team. Definitely deserving of their ranking at this point too.
All right. I had a great thing to say. Now I'm gonna forget it. Oh, okay. Yeah, Johnny Gardner says nice job on the graphics and the border. Yeah, I got to give a shout out. Not a shutout. That's what ECU did this past weekend. I got to give a shout out to Bubba Rosenbaum of the Sports Objective. He put together some graphics. I appreciate Bubba for doing that. And I'm going to try to get him the actual font of our logo so that way it matches up even better. But definitely good for now. I appreciate Bubba for doing that. Let's get into grading ECU baseball's non-conference season thus far, because of course conference play is here. We will get into conference play as ECU travels to Houston this coming weekend, so we'll break that down a little bit later in the show. But we got to talk about the non-conference portion. Of course, there will be games ongoing throughout the season in the midweek, but right now we've got the biggest sample size, and this will stay the biggest sample size. 19-5 is ECU's record through non-conference play. 3-4 in midweek games, all of those but the William & Mary game on the road or away from home, and ECU 16-1 in weekend action with the lone loss coming to Long Beach State. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. You guys might, as far as strength of schedule, RPI, I think ECU's around 10 or so. But overall, I'll let you guys get the grade first. I'll wrap it up. But 19-5 is hard to complain with that record in any regard. We'll start with you, Jonathan. Just your grade, your assessment of what ECU has been able to do 24 games into the season.
Yeah, I think if I had to put a grade on it, I would probably I would say B+, I think. I think the pitching alone, the pitching has been elite from top to bottom. The rotation, the bullpen for the outside of the couple midweek games. And I mean, the starting rotation is as good as anyone in the country right now. And I mean, you look at that. I have questions about the offense, about the bats. There were questions early on about defense. I think those have kind of settled down over the past couple of weekends. But I mean, overall, 16-1 on weekends. That's perfect right there. In the end, if you might lose some midweek games, you're playing some really good teams on midweeks as well. But in the end, you need to win your weekends. And yeah, the midweek games might be what boosts you RPI wise, but if you lose weekends, that's what'll make you fall. So to me, ECU's handled business. There's still a lot of room to grow, which is what's exciting because they are 19-5 right now, and they're really, I think a couple of plays away from being better than that. So I'd give a B+ with plenty of room to grow, and a lot of stuff to be encouraged about, but also plenty of room to improve.
So Wise goes B+. Dan Rosenblum in the comment section, he goes B+ as well because of weekend play. Chuck says B-. Scott, you going above B+, B-? Where are you going with this?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying that our non-conference strength of schedule was 30. Our non-conference RPI was 8. We started the year off ranked 11th, and now we're ranked 8th. The goal, I think, for our team should be to be a top 8 national seed. And we've put ourselves in position to do that by how we play in the non-conference. It's easy to get hung up on 4 of our losses coming on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. If 2 of those losses were flipped, not even the Campbell ones, just 2 random ones, and we had 2 more weekend losses and 2 fewer, I should say, midweek losses, I don't think people would be panicking so much about the midweek, and this would look like an A or an A-. And I think that's where I'm at, is an A-. If you look at us getting to a top 8 right now and being in position to, potentially host a super regional in Clark LeClaire again as a national seed and taking, 2 games against UNC in comeback fashion, I'd have a hard time ranking that below an A-. So, I'll stick with A-.
I, too, am going A-. I think for me, the midweek games have been a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, you almost erase it when you dominate the weekend like ECU has. And we'll get more into the discussion of needing to win some midweek games because of the RPI, because of top 25, top 50 wins. But I feel like A-, just based on the record, 19-5. I mean, that's a really good record. I don't care if you're playing high school teams, middle school teams, or whatever. If you're a college program, 19-5 is tough to do. More times than not, ECU's been able to find a way to win. And 2, you got the big, the win over North Carolina, the series win over North Carolina. At this point, with the season UNC's having, they haven't been elite, but they've been good. And so I think it kind of holds up still as your, all right, here's when we play, not even ECU's best because they didn't play their best that weekend, but hey, here's our potential. We can take down a a good ACC team on the road and at home. We'll see what happens in the third game, and I think you've already accomplished that. You needed a crucial non-conference series win because of how weak the league is, which we'll get into. But you can't really ask for much more. I think A minus, B plus in that range are fair, just because if you go much lower than that, then I guess you really expected ECU to be 21-4 or 21-3, 20-4 right now, or whatever the record is. I can't do math. I suck at math. So, Dave, I think I may have already said him. He says B plus. Josh says A. They beat the Tar Heels twice. Chris Lehman says A minus because of the pitching. Our weekend guys are fine. Paul says A minus is fair. And I think we had another response. Maybe not. Either way. So, yeah, a lot of B pluses, A minus. I think that's fair. A plus, to get that, you almost have to go undefeated or, win every midweek game. So, the bottom line is, Jonathan, this team has put itself in the position it needs to be in. Could they be in a better position with the goal of being a national seed again? Because that's what they did last year, and I think that's what people are hoping for. Obviously they could have won a few more midweek games, but to this point, if they go out and dominate the conference again, they're going to be right in that discussion.
Yeah, they have to be. And I think something I talked about earlier in the year, but I really think that a big key to ECU being where they are right now is that starting rotation, because Trey Savage, Carter Spivey, and Josh Gross were all in a rotation opening weekend. They weren't in the same exact order. Spivey and Savage were flipped. But, those guys settled in, and they're going deep into ball games now. So that's really let everyone else in the bullpen settle into roles. You're able to use guys like Garrett Saylor, Jake Hunter, Zach Roots on midweek. And, yeah, you might not have won all the midweeks yet, but I still think the pitching overall has been so good. And if the pitching – look at who we played. We played teams like Carolina. We played some good hitting teams in non-conference. And you look ahead at the schedule, usually you say it doesn't get any easier, but it doesn't get any harder because the American is not good. So I expect the ECU's pitching staff to just continue dominating like it has been. And if they do, then I think the case for ECU to be a top 8 seed is going to be pretty undeniable.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And apparently I misspoke. Chris Lehman, I'm just struggling tonight, guys. Chris Lehman says, I was going to say A plus because of the pitching. Our weekend guys are fire. Did I say fine?
You did.
Our weekend guys are fine? Okay.
Yeah.
Chris said fire. Fire, he says. I'm trying not to wake up Slater in the next room. Nor my wife, who is sleeping on the couch now because of her discomfort. So I'm being a little bit more quiet tonight. Either way, let's get into more of these questions. Chuck wants to know, is ODU in somebody's top 25? That, of course, is a future non-conference midweek opponent. Are they ranked? Or are they on the verge of being ranked?
I think they would have been in this week had they not gone 2-2. They lost their midweek and went 2-1 on the weekend. I think that kept them out. I think D1 was looking for a Sun Belt team to put in the top 25, so it's unfortunate that they did go 2-2 this week. For our purposes, we're talking about the D1 poll. I don't know if they're ranked in Randy's college baseball basement poll or whatever, of the 50 that are out there. But, you look at Coastal jumping to 19. I think that would have been Old Dominion had they gone 3-1 last week or, 4-0. But, they're a legitimate team. They're 20-4, I think, now. I think they will be ranked at some point this year, maybe as soon as next week.
Yeah, they're going to be a high RPI game, I think, either way. Chuck also adds, we only have 4 or 5 power RPI games. It's a new term there, power RPI. Campbell, UNC State ×2. We need to win all those games. I won't say they need to win all the games, but certainly they could win 2 or 3 of them. And if you do win all of them, which is unlikely, you set yourself up in a pretty good spot. ODU, I think, is up there right now too. So that's, 2 against ODU, 2 against State, UNC Campbell. That's 6 probably top 3-ish RPI games left. So, even if you split those, if you go 3-3, I think you're feeling pretty good as long as you take care of business in conference play. So, huge midweek games coming up. We'll get into UNCW in a little bit, Jonathan. But, what do you kind of feel like as we look at the future non-conference schedule ECU needs to do in those 6 games along with other games? But pretty much every midweek game at this point is going to be a pretty big game, and the importance of playing better in the midweek.
Yeah, I think I'm not overly worried about, and I think my biggest concern, and I've said it before, my biggest concern with this team right now is the offense and, the quality of at-bats. And on weekends, the offense seems fine for the most part. But I don't know if this is just a trend, that it's a coincidence, or if this team just struggles getting off the bus. But I think the bats in those midweek games, a lot of them, the real struggles where they've showed up have been road games. And you look at that remaining, at least the midweek schedule, that Campbell game is at home, Carolina game is at home, one of the state games is at home, the other one's on the road. But I think for me, I'm very interested to see, and this isn't midweek, but I'm very interested for this weekend because, like I just said, I think a trend has been the offense has started very slow on the road this year. And a true road trip to Houston, that's a plane ride. And, I'm interested to see how they come out of the gates this weekend. And then I'm interested to see how they continue that, and just the quality of at-bats consistently throughout the remainder of the season, whether it's midweek, whether it's weekend, whether it's home, whether it's away. I just think that's the biggest question I have, and I think a lot of people have right now. So it's that, and then health. Health is the biggest thing right now. We've seen injuries pop up, but I think that's the most important thing. Quality at-bats and staying healthy, and I think this team's going to be okay.
As we stay on the midweek topic, I just have to read this comment from Josh Hill because it's too good. Who is the most overrated big school, parentheses big, in North Carolina, and why is it NC State? Also, how many millimeters of rain will it take for Elliott Avent to cancel the game in Raleigh? Love you, Josh. Appreciate this comment. I definitely think, and you saw him firsthand, Scott, NC State is always a hitting team that has like 2 or 3 good arms, and then there's a major drop off, and it seems like that's almost the same thing this year.
Yeah, I've watched them quite a bit. My in-laws both went to NC State, and my father-in-law actually has season tickets to NC State, so I tag along sometimes just to get out of the house and watch some baseball. So nobody throw rocks at me for that, but also that helps me get in when we play there. Yeah, from what I could see is they have a pretty good Friday night starter. Their Saturday guys like 84. I think his name's Willardson. And then Sunday, I think they've kind of bounced around guys and thrown a freshman or two. But their bullpen when you see an ACC team trot out guys throwing like 84, 85, 82, 83, you just don't really expect that out of an ACC team or really even a top 25 team. Like, you look at some of the teams we played this year, like Georgetown had guys throwing in the 90s. George Mason had a guy that threw like 94. Like, it's just really, really surprising to see them not have, like you said, they don't always have great pitching, but they don't really have good pitching at all this year. They give up a lot of runs. They don't play great defense. They lost that Boston College game. Like Jack pointed out here, on their right fielder just fell down. It's just one of the most bizarre fielding blunders I've seen in a while. He just fell over. Also watched one of their fielders drop his hat over their fence earlier this year on a ball he tried to rob, and then his hat was just on the other side of the fence. And then, like, they don't have like an easy access at their stadium. Someone had like run around and get in. But yeah, I think State, they'll go on a stretch here in probably 2 or 3 weeks when they play the weaker part of their schedule where they win 2 series in a row. But they look like a 500 or worse ACC team to me. But that's not to say that they can't beat us, because they really can hit the ball. And if we go in there on Tuesday nights and leave 10, 11 guys on base, they're going to probably put up 4, 5, 6 runs. So it's going to be really important to get guys on, over, and in, and not just on and over like we've done the last couple midweeks.
Yeah, and I've covered this team a long time. Obviously, grew up watching ECU baseball. I can't remember the last time ECU won in Raleigh over NC State. Like, it feels like it's been a long time. So, I mean, it's, we can talk crap about NC State, and obviously some of this is in jest. Like, they're a good baseball program. They've been to Omaha multiple times, but ECU's got to find a way to at least beat them once in the midweek, hopefully, and then kind of kill that Raleigh bug. I've seen them lose some. I've seen some unfortunate things go against them in Doak, including a home run that was down the line that was, I believe, called foul, and then Avent went out to argue. They overturned it, and Cliff about lost his mind. But yeah, we'll obviously preview that game more when we get there. Kind of on this topic, Philip Unger wants to know, as far as rankings go, what remaining game on the schedule is the biggest? For me, I don't think a midweek game matters that much, guys. Like, if you drop a weekend series in conference play, you're going to plummet in the rankings. So this may be a cop-out answer, but like for me, every weekend is still the most important because you can beat NC State throwing whoever. But if you lose 2 out of 3 to Cincinnati, you're going to plummet in the rankings. So any disagreements there, Jonathan? We'll start with you.
No, I completely agree. The midweek games, yeah, they're nice to win, and you want them, especially for the RPI boost. But like I said earlier, you can lose a midweek game, but if you lose on the weekends, that's when you drop, like you said. And I think, to me, it's just the lack of – I don't even want to say lack of quality because that's giving the conference too much credit. The lack of average baseball in this conference, it's alarming. I mean, I think you have to go in and sweep UCF because that's probably your last quality series remaining. So I think you got to go in and sweep that. You don't have to, obviously, but that's your last chance to really give yourself a boost, a weekend boost. And obviously, who knows how the rest of the conference will shake out the rest of the season. There's a lot of baseball left to go. But, yeah, I think the weekends are what's important, and you have to take advantage of the chances you do get to face a quality team. And I think we can consider UCF as a quality-ish right now, or maybe that's just because they're so much better than the rest of the conference, which is not saying anything.
Yeah, who really knows at this point? Every week I think UCF's pretty good. They lose. Who'd they lose to? They got crushed by Maryland the last few games this weekend.
Yeah.
Which Maryland's not bad, but still, Big Ten baseball is a joke. Welcome back, Iowa. Scott, any thoughts here, or are you kind of in tune with Wags and I?
Yeah, I think the 24 conference games are probably the most important games on our schedule right now. As many of those as we can win will help us in the long run. And then, yeah, that UCF weekend be huge. Their record versus their Q1 record, I think they're like 6-2, and then their Q2 record is like 2-5 or something like that. So they definitely get up for the good teams that they play, and we're going to be probably one of the better teams that they'll play all year. I know they swept Florida State over back-to-back midweek games. But just to say something that's not the weekend, I'll say UNC, if we can sweep them for our resume, that's going to be really nice, especially if they keep playing the way that they've been playing, staying in the top 16, where they're going to be a host site. If we can say, well, we have a 3-game sweep over a team that hosts. And then Campbell, if they're also in that conversation, winning that last game to where we can say, well, we won 1, they won 2. If we can beat them by like 4 or 5, we can say, well, they won 2 by 1 run each, and we won ours by a lot more. So, I think it really is the conference games, but winning against both UNC and Campbell, I think, is going to go a long way for our resume.
Yeah, I think Campbell is kind of a sneaky big game into the regular season because I remember last year they threw their Friday night guy for a couple innings in that game. May have even started him, but because they were basically gearing up for the conference tournament at that point, wanted another marquee win, and they're going to try to say, hey, we swept East Carolina if they're in the mix for a hosting spot. So that's a big game for them and for ECU to prevent that from happening. Johnny Robertson says he's our stat guy. He says in the last 14 games, the Pirates have only allowed one run after the seventh inning. Missouri State game 3, the Pirates have outscored their opponents 44-4 in the eighth inning on the season. Indiana and Georgetown are the only teams to score in the eighth. Great stats, Johnny. First off, secondly, it just kind of shows ECU has become an elite late game offense. Basically, when they get to the other team's bullpen, they've been elite, and then the bullpen itself for ECU has been pretty incredible. Of late, I mean, Wyatt Lunsford-Shinkman has been a big part of that. I feel like we need to talk about him, Wags, his development, because he's been pitching in a lot of these late game situations. So what have you seen to allow these statistics to come to life?
Yeah, I think Wyatt Lunsford-Shinkman is an interesting guy because I think he kind of came on late last year, and all off season long, he was kind of talked up to be, that next guy to step up in the bullpen. But even with that, I still think he kind of went, maybe a little underrated going into the year. He wasn't quite as high on maybe my radar as he probably should have been when we talked about impact bullpen guys. And again, I'm going to bring everything back to this, but I really think that Lunsford-Shinkman's development has a lot to do with the success of the starting rotation. Because a lot of times he comes in after Trey Savage on Friday nights, and he goes the rest of the way. Whether Savage is going one inning in the ninth to close it out in a one-run game, or he's coming in a close game in the seventh or the sixth, and he's going the rest of the way, pretty much no questions asked. And I mean, he's got a really, really strong fastball. His off speed's been a lot better this year, I think. And I mean, he doesn't mess around. He doesn't walk guys. He's around the strike zone a lot. And teams might put the ball in play, but with the way he has pitched this year, it hasn't mattered. He's been pretty much unhittable. And it's really nice to see, especially with, some of the injuries with like Garrett Saylor this past weekend, Willie Lumpkin last week, and just kind of those guys, a little short-handed. Having Lunsford-Shinkman step up and pitch as well as he has been really nice to see. And I think he's that next guy. He's taken on that Carter Spivey role out of the bullpen from last year, I believe.
It's got so often last year we saw ECU's best relievers come in like the third, fourth, fifth inning, and now we're finally seeing those guys come in late in games, and I think that has something to do with it too, as Wags kind of hit on. But we've seen Shinkman a lot, but have any other guys caught your eye? I mean, we haven't seen too many relievers lately, but we're going to have to see more coming up. Obviously, going to UNCW in the midweek game, and then with Saylor being sidelined for a little bit.
Right, yeah. Landon again this weekend looked pretty good. Garrett Saylor was obviously, kind of rolling along there until his injury. Jake Hunter in the midweek has been pretty great. I think we have 6 guys who have a whip under 1, and 5 of those guys are in the bullpen. And that's, you look at it, and it's just we're those guys are going to be so much more fresh when we get to Clearwater, which is where I think it's really going to be important. In the years past, where especially last year, even though we won it, our strength wasn't our pitching; it was our bullpen. But your bullpen gets taxed when you play 4 or 5 games over a short period of time. And the same thing going into regional weekend, where your bullpen is going to be really, really important. Those guys are going to have much fresher arms this year than they had last year, or really any year that I can recall at all.
While we're on this topic, Jack says, I might have missed it. Did we get an update on Saylor? So, yeah, Saylor, Cliff described it Friday, I believe, as day-to-day with an oblique rib deal. He said on 94.3 the game today that it's probably going to be at least a few weeks. With the oblique for a pitcher, they don't want to – with so much torque there, the last thing you want to do is re-aggravate it. So I've already heard he's feeling a ton better. It's just one of those things where hold him out now, give him a week or two, then slowly work him back in, see how he does physically, because there's too much on the line too much season left to try and rush him back. And honestly, with the way the pitching staff is, you can find the innings with other guys right now. So certainly want him to get healthy and be welcomed back sooner rather than later. But that's kind of the situation right now with Garrett Saylor. We got a few questions about tomorrow night's game against UNCW. First off, it has been designated as a blackout. So if you're going, I guess wear black. The team will be wearing black. Jake Hunter is scheduled to get the start. And I can't remember who's starting for UNCW. We had a few people ask what the pitch matchup is. But with Saylor sidelined, a big opportunity for Hunter. And it's kind of been the Saylor, Zach Root, Jake Hunter show in the midweek games thus far of late, Jonathan. So what are you expecting or hoping for Jake tomorrow night?
I think it's the same thing, with anybody, especially on midweeks. Just go in there and pound a strike zone. If they hit you, they hit you. But to me, I'd rather, if you're going to lose, I'd rather do it by teams hitting you than you walking guys and not making them earn it. And I think Jake Hunter has been really good this year, and a lot of that has to do with exactly that. He's throwing strikes. He's around the strike zone a lot, and it's the same thing. He's not really messing around. He's around the zone. He's not working around guys. He's going right after hitters, and I think that speaks to his confidence. And Jake Hunter's been really nice, whether it's been him, starting midweeks or even pitching out of the bullpen a couple times. It's been really nice to see. And I did look up UNCW's pitcher is Ryan Calvert. He has 4.1 innings on the year, 0.0 ERA. That's about all I got on him. But yeah, I think for Jake Hunter, it's just the same thing. Go out, throw strikes. You got the home crowd behind you. Hopefully it's a nice crowd. And hopefully your bats can come out hot and give you a lead early on. But if your bats do start slow, you pretty much need to beat, I think, that 1 to 2 run range, if not better than that. And I'm confident that Jake Hunter can do that.
Yeah, Ryan Calvert thus far, he's a 6'5", 230-pound right-hander, by the way. So a big boy. 4 1/3 innings, like you said, 6 Ks, 2 walks. So it looks like it'll be a staff day for UNCW. I wouldn't expect them to go too far. They kind of went staff day against ECU the first time around with mixed results. They held ECU to 5 runs, but again, 15 guys were left on base, so you were 1 hit away from scoring 7-8 runs. Scott, what are you expecting Tuesday? Whether it be Jake Hunter, whether it be from the Pirates in general, and what's always a fun midweek game when the rival Seahawks come to town?
Yeah. So one, I think I'm more interested to see how we bounce back against the loss against them at their place. Kind of like I was with Campbell. We didn't respond as well as I thought we would with Campbell. I'm hoping that we respond much better against UNCW. But I would look to see Jake Hunter go between 3 and 5 innings. If we get 4 out of him, I think that's a good outing. Followed by Root, and hopefully he can give you 3 or more innings. Really, it's going to be pitch count, though. It's probably 50 pitches for Hunter, 50 pitches for Root, and then, the bullpen take it the rest of the way. But, yeah, I think we just need to jump out on them. I'm happy that we actually get to watch this one and we don't have to pay $80 to watch it through somebody's cell phone camera. But, I just want to see us respond. Get guys on base, get them on, get them in, and, put up 12, 13 runs on midweek pitching like we really should, and this team is really capable of.
Jake Hunter thus far, the biggest impression for me, guys, has been the uptick in strikeouts, 18 Ks against 4 walks in 12 innings. The slider has become a swing and miss pitch for him. It was not that way last year. He's not a guy who should fall in love with the strikeout because his command is always going to lead him. But at the same time, just his development to have a little more swing and miss to his game. He hasn't given up a home run yet this year. I know I just put the jinx on him, but either way, I'm knocking on wood. Still, even if he goes up and gives up 2 bombs tomorrow, like 0 home runs through 12 innings is a big deal for Jake. 37 pitches against Missouri State a couple weeks ago, and then 44 at UNCW. He's been up to 69 at Elon as far as pitch count, but I do think 50 pitches sounds about right. Scott, somewhere in that range, depending on how the game goes. So big opportunity for the Pirates to bounce back. against UNCW. And before we get off this midweek topic, since there'll be a lot of midweek games left, we'll hit on it from Dave. He says we are 3-4 midweek, right? That is correct. We should have great midweek crowds versus Wilmington State and UNC, so that would be a boost. Plus a good crowd for the last Campbell game. Would seem to be pretty important that we finish over 500 midweek. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know. I mean, does the committee look at what did ECU do midweek at all at the end of the regular season? Unless ECU just loses 8 out of 9 of these games, I think maybe it's not as important than we might think. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want to lose all your midweek games. I think that shows a severe lack of either depth or hitting, or I'm not even sure what. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if we went 24-0 in our conference and lost every midweek game. I don't know that it affects us any more or less than if we went 20-4 and won four of the midweek games. I mean, it really comes down to wins and losses. In the eyes of the committee, they do look at weekend series losses. That is a metric that they have looked at in years past. So, yeah, I don't think you have to win your midweek games. I just think it's a bad look not to win games during the middle of the week.
It's just one of those things, Wags, where if you don't win any midweek games, it leaves you so little margin for error elsewhere. So it's like, look, we're making a big deal about this because ECU's dominated the weekend, so like we have nothing else to talk about. That's negative. So we got to dwell on the negative. That's what the media, that's what the fans do. That's what we're getting questions about. But these things tend to balance out. I'd be pretty surprised if ECU just doesn't win any midweek games. And two, it's like they've only played one midweek game at home. They're not going to lose all these games at home, I don't think, over the coming weeks.
Yeah, like I said, I think there probably is some correlation with the midweek struggles being a lot of them have been on the road so far. So the next stretch pretty much all being at home will be nice, and I expect more wins because of that. But as far as, how much they impact your standing in the end, I think if you keep going what you're doing right now and you go about 500 midweeks, it's probably not going to matter. If you go and win the rest of them, yeah, the committee might notice. If you lose them all, the committee will notice. But in the end, it's if you keep dominating the weekend, it's going to take so much attention off of the midweeks, I think. But I think that is a good point that you brought up with if you do come out and say lose to UNCW, it does add pressure to the weekend. Not that the team's playing for the rankings, they don't give a crap about any of that stuff. But at least it's easy for us to say, if you lose on Tuesday, you want to win every game, but you have to win the series. You have to go 2-1 on the weekend. And I think there is so little margin for error, so the team might not be focusing on it, but I think that does matter. So that's an important little counterbalance there to look at, but you just win them. That's my hope.
Just win, baby. I don't know why that was so funny. Josh Hill, we haven't talked like any actual personnel in this podcast, so let's do some of that. And I think this is a valid question, and we talk about this because if a guy's batting average isn't high or whatever, these things tend to get noticed. But he asked, should Dixon Williams be getting more playing time if Alec Makarevich can't get back in a groove at the plate? I did think AMAC looked better this weekend. And again, Coach Godwin said they did some film review for his left-handed swing and think they kind of fixed some things. He hit the long home run over the weekend. And that's part of his game. Home run, swing and miss, you're going to get that. I would like to see Dixon Williams or Connor Rasmussen play, but it's just one of those things you're kind of squeezed right now. You can only play 9 guys. And what's your take on this, Scott, as far as getting Dixon potentially more at bats as the season moves on?
Yeah, I think I texted you guys last week that I thought AMAC just needed a day off. You look at what it did for Hoover, who's batting like 500 over the last 2 weeks. Getting a couple days off to kind of reevaluate things, to watch the game, to be a observer of the game while you're at the game, and less of a participant. Sometimes it can change your perspective. You can start picking up on things that you missed just by stepping away. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Dixon Williams get some playing time, over AMAC or even maybe at short a game or two just to see what he can do there, especially if we're on a Sunday where we're up late, just to see what else we have. Um, Not that Barini hasn't done well of late, but yeah, I could definitely see a Dixon Williams start in the next few games happening.
Yeah, and I think he's put up good at bats. I know he struck out this weekend in a pinch hit late in the game, but typically has worked a good count. He's put the ball in play, hit it hard a couple times. So he's going to be a big time player, whether or not it happens this year. Same with other guys on the roster like Rasmussen, Cam Clonch. We saw step up this past weekend, awesome defensively. So it's just when you've got such a good team and you've recruited so well, you got a ton of depth. It's hard to play everybody. I mean, Carter Cunningham is playing well. Nowak, Riley Johnson, Cunningham, JC, they can't all play at the same time along with Riley Johnson. I don't know if I mentioned him, but there's 5 outfitters and there's 3 spots. So either way, Dan Rosenblum, speaking of, I think the guy left out was Lane Hoover. So let's talk about this, guys. Lane Hoover. First off, great moments. We didn't even know at the time that his grandfather, he had talked with him earlier in the day, didn't know how much time was left with him, and he actually ended up passing away during the game. They said before he hit the home run, which Lane didn't know that until our interview. So extremely emotional day for Lane Hoover. Awesome moment. Dan wants to know, the Lane Hoover home run hit the Taco Bell sign. He needs closure. Scott, you watched this replay, 75 times at least?
I watched it I didn't want to ask. That's how many times I was like, I'm going to figure out if this hit this sign or not. And finally I was just like, I give up. Like I was like, I'll just text you guys and find out. So apparently it did not hit the Taco Bell sign. So that was unfortunate. Also, just want to, our thoughts are with Lane and his family, obviously, for the loss of his grandfather. I've been really close with mine over the years, so I would imagine that's been pretty tough on him. So, yeah, our thoughts are with him. And, but unfortunately, he did not hit the Taco Bell sign.
Yeah, no Taco Bell sign, although, to be honest, guys, we could just be that. We could be the start of the urban legend and just say that they grazed the Taco Bell sign, and then it could just roll from there. Nobody would ever know. Nobody would question us. They would not question the ducks on pond. What was
it was the Bucks on the pond.
Oh yeah, the Bucks on the pond.
It was a good try.
Maybe our pitching staff should just refer to themselves as the Taco Bell sign because nobody can hit it.
There you go. That's a good one right there.
That's
right.
Wow. Scott's one-liner.
Scott's on a roll.
All-time high right now. Do you think about this content all day while you're working? Like, what can I say on the podcast?
That one was just off the dome there, but yeah, there's a lot while I'm working.
Yeah, fair enough. Christian Bateman asks, "What's going on with the transfer from Texas A&M?" Christian, where you been at, bro? That's all I'm gonna say. He's gone. Not Christian.
He was on my list of people that I thought would be like surprise contributors on the first podcast. So shout out to me for being wrong.
Hey, we all take L's every now and then. I think I said a few years ago something about some guy leading the team in wins. I don't even think he had a win. So happens to the best of us, or the worst of us in my case. All right, Josh Hill says, let's see here. Contrary to some of the message board, what Austin Knight has done the last 2 years with this staff has been super impressive. Yeah, I thought that Austin Knight was inexperienced and had no clue what he was doing, Jonathan. I thought that he was a terrible pitching coach. What happened?
It's so crazy to me how going into the offseason there could even be questions. I mean, if you look at the pitching staff last year, and we've talked about this to no end, but last year you entered thinking Carson Whisenhunt was going to be a Friday night ace. And it's so far away. I mean, who knows what the rotation would have been after that. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. Opening weekend, you're scrambling to fill a rotation. And like I've rambled on for hours before, that last year just did not allow the pitching staff to find their role, I don't think. And I think that's why the team struggled early on. But look at conference play. You can chalk it up to the American being crappy or whatever, but to me, it has everything to do with just guys stepping up when you needed them to. CJ Mayhew started off in the bullpen and kind of that ultimate closer role, and then he was your Friday night guy in the postseason. Ryder Giles was your starting shortstop, an occasional change of pace bullpen guy first half of the year, really first couple years of his career. He was your Friday night guy for a month and a half there, and he did a really good job there. And just the way guys were able to piece it together, and it was just that closer's mentality they talked about game after game last year. Just you're not going in there thinking, oh, I need to go 6 innings. Just go out there. Get through an inning. If you hand it over the next guy, you hand it over the next guy. But this year, what's impressive is we've seen what Austin Knight can do with the pitching staff when you're having to scramble, but now we're seeing what he can do with the pitching staff when you don't. Trey Savage is an elite Friday night guy. Josh Gross is an elite Sunday guy right now. He's probably a Friday caliber arm too. Carter Spivey is too. He's been a lot better than what his numbers have shown. And this year, I think the bullpen has been a little shallow just in terms of availability at times. And just the development of guys, whether it's midseason last year or last year to this year, just the major jumps guys have taken, it's undeniable. And I think all the credit goes to Austin Knight. And yeah, the questions about him, I don't understand, but I will continue going on that rant that I just went on and I've gone on time after time. But you couldn't have asked for a better job, especially given the situation that ECU's been in the past couple of years. So all the credit to Austin Knight.
Yeah, look at some of these numbers, guys, on the mound thus far. Obviously, 3.08 ERA is good, but 258 strikeouts as a pitching staff compared to 82 walks and a 219 batting average against. They've allowed just 14 home runs in 24 games. I mean, those are elite numbers no matter which way you slice them. Obviously, starting rotation gets a ton of that credit. But, Scott, I think we all knew this pitching staff had the chance to be good, but how it's shaping up, and again, long way to go. They got to continue it. They got to stay healthy. But I don't know if we could envision quite this.
This is kind of what we expected when we had Gavin and Whisenhunt on Friday and Saturday nights. You look at Trey Savage coming out, and he's got a sub-1 whip and a sub-2 ERA and a ton of strikeouts. He has 11 strikeout games already this year. Then you flip to Groves, who's only gotten better. This last weekend was probably his best pitching performance that he's had at ECU. And not so much because he's getting strikeouts. It's because he didn't walk him. He walked one guy in 8 innings. And then Spivey, when you look at these 3 starters, it might surprise you to find out that Spivey has given up fewer extra base hits than any of the other 3 or the other 2. He's only given up 5 doubles and no home runs, no triples. And I think his whip is at 1.5. You'd like it probably down to 1.2 or 1.25, somewhere in that range. But there's been so many soft hits that have fallen in when Spivey's been pitching. And then we have a defense that has a fielding percentage of 0.981. So eventually those batting average on balls in play numbers are going to start to work in Spivey's favor. And you'll see him go 6, 7, 8 innings because he does pitch to contact and he does pitch to weak contact. And once you put all that together, I mean, you're looking at a staff that is capable of just carrying this team to Omaha over 2 weekends in June.
All right, to completely switch gears, Philip Unger asks, more absurd ejection, Cliff and Moylan after the game Wednesday or JT Real Muto today in spring training? So I just looked at the Real Muto clip while you were talking, Scott. No disrespect. But I had to get some clarification. I scrolled by it earlier today, but I had to really watch it to give a fair answer. Have y'all seen it?
Yeah.
Awful.
Okay. So I don't think you can get worse than I don't think you can get more absurd than that. So I feel like this is a pretty easy one to answer. Wags, we'll start with you, but feel free to give your take on also the Cliff and Moylan clip, which we don't have as good a video of, to be fair, but still, I thought both were a little absurd.
Yeah, I'll start with the Remuto one, but I think I was reading just Twitter because I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe that he got ejected for that in a spring training game, nonetheless. But I think earlier in the game there was a situation similar where Remuto kind of put his glove back to get the ball from the umpire, and the umpire threw it back to the pitcher himself. So I think Remuto didn't get the ball right away when he put his hand back, and so he probably assumed the same thing. Put his arm down. That's what we think. Maybe he was being an ass. Who knows? But probably not. It's ridiculous. And then on the Cliff and Moylan one, we don't know exactly what was said or done. We saw the video. Shout out to Carter Cunningham's dad for streaming that one for us. And, did Josh Moylan draw a line in the sand? It kind of looked like he did, which is an ejection. Definitely an ejection. But at that point, just walk away. And I think that one, if Josh Moylan, if that's what he actually did, he did draw a line in the sand, then you're not going to hear any complaints from me about him getting ejected there. But either way, that Remuto one is just ridiculous. I'm tired of the ump show. Same thing with guys. The Bryson Worrell watching his home run last year and the umpire pushed him along. It's like, just go away. Just go away.
And Scott, it seems like for me, a 2-game, and it's not an official suspension, basically for the player, technically speaking, we texted about this. You're getting ejected for the next game, whatever the hell that means. And then you're getting suspended. But basically a 2-game suspension unofficially. That just seems like that's a rule probably written for something absurd. Speaking of absurd, for Josh Moylan to have to sit 2 games for literally drawing a line in the sand is the most – it's bullshit. I'm sorry, but I mean, come on. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I will tell you that the ECU intramural policy for being ejected after a game is only 1 game. I know that from personal experience. So that's something that Cliff and I now can bond over is getting ejected to a game in a game that is actually over. When I was ejected, the guy told me, "You're out of here." And I said, "Everyone's out of here. The game is over." And this was the last game of the night. So then I had to go talk to the head of ECU intramurals. And I served only a 1-game suspension, much like Cliff. So, 2 games is a lot for you. And one thing I'll say with both the Real Muto and the Moylan thing is you don't know what was said, which is often a thing that is missed with baseball ejections is because there's no microphone. You don't hear the words, and there are certain words maybe not even the one that Igo used earlier that you just can't say to an umpire. If you watch Bull Durham, they'll fill you in. But you never know what was said. And so without knowing that, it's hard to say whether it was justified or not. But I would agree that 2 games is a lot for a guy up there in a top 25 matchup with a game on the line. He gets called out on a pitch that he thought was out, and he was upset about it and showed some emotion. Those are the kind of guys that I want to have on our team. It's unfortunate that it cost him, 2 games that he'll never get back.
Yeah, that's the other thing is the umpire has to understand it's an emotional moment. You're ending the game on a called 3rd strike. If it's the 3rd inning and it's 5-0 and he draws a line in the sand, that's one thing. Just be the bigger man and walk away. All right, it's not that big of a deal. The game wasn't even streamed. Nobody's going to freaking see it unless you eject him. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? Now everybody saw it. Don't get me started. All right. We'll go rapid fire with some of these questions because we're getting at 10 o'clock. If you got any final questions, drop them in the comments section. We'll hit them here shortly. Josh Hill wants to know, does John Gilbert, who was appointed to the committee, help us on the committee, or does he try and appear unbiased and overcorrect? I think it helps. I don't think there's any way it doesn't help. It should be noted he will not be on the committee for this year. He's being appointed, I believe, in August, so or September, so it'll be future years. So it will not impact ECU. At least, he may have a line to the committee, but he will not be in the room. But he's going to be on the committee for several years. So definitely a significant advantage there. Awesome comment here from Dave. Honestly, thought nobody actually went out and did this. But Dave says, went to KFC after Friday night game, 15 strikeouts. If you're unaware, KFC has a promo they're running now where 10 strikeouts, right, gets you a free chicken leg. And Dave went. There were no chicken legs at KFC. By the way, what are you doing at KFC if you get – how can you not have chicken legs if you're Kentucky Fried Chicken? I mean,
they
that's
only had
the
original
main
recipe. Dave wanted extra crispy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to their credit, Dave says they very graciously subbed out other chicken pieces, so kudos to them.
That's a weird way to put it, Dave. Obviously, other chicken pieces that could mean anything. Dave left with 3 chicken feet. And also, Dave asked a question earlier that I was going to hit on, but
Okay.
he asked about the left on base numbers from last year. We left 480 on base over 67 games, which would be about 7 a game. And this year we're about 8.5, or a little more than 8.5. So yeah, I mean they're definitely up. So we've done, I think it's 8.45, 203 left on base through 24 games. So to answer your question, Dave.
This man did live math on the podcast, or maybe he already had it ready to go. Either way, impressive work, Scott. Dave says they waited till after the game was over, so maybe early leavers beat us to the legs. Maybe so. Frank Durham says 15 chicken gizzards. Johnny Robertson says 169 through. What does that mean, Johnny? Am I missing something here? I don't know. Okay, anyway. Maybe he was starting to type and then didn't finish. I don't know. All right, Frank Durham, this is a good question. Would our pitching staff in 2023 have been able to beat Texas in 2? I think they would certainly be able to beat this Texas squad in 2, but obviously we're talking about last year. Yeah, I mean, probably. It's always tough to say the what-if game, but I think the way ECU's pitching now, if you had Worrell hitting in this lineup, absolutely. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I think I do think it's something. When I saw that question, my first thought was, I think you do have to consider, Trey Savage is better than what CJ Mayhew was last year, and CJ Mayhew was really good. And so if he came in with Trey Savage on Friday, I don't think anybody beats Trey Savage. Obviously, it could happen, but I think you win that game. You won that game last year. And then game 2, if you roll out Carter Spivey, I don't know. It depends. Do you roll out Carter Spivey or do you roll out Josh Gross? Josh Gross, I believe, started game 3 last year, or was it game 2? He started one of those either way.
I think it was game 2.
Okay,
yeah. Danny Bill started game 3.
That's right. Okay, but then I think if you look at Josh Gross of last year, Josh Gross of this year is a completely different Josh Gross. So I think, to me, if you roll out maybe those 2, then you've got a pretty good shot. But whether you're rolling out Savage and Spivey, Savage and Gross, I think you have a chance against anybody.
Scott, you think the Pirates of 2023 beat the Texas Longhorns of 2022, pitching staff-wise?
So the question was in 2. I don't know that we win that series in 2 games still. But yeah, I mean, I think that third game is significantly closer and much more competitive than what it turned out to be. And part of that would just be that you would see Savage go on Friday night really deep into the game. We'd have more of our bullpen arms on Saturday. Maybe we do win in 2 on Saturday with a couple extra guys out of the bullpen. And then I think Sunday that game's a lot tighter. If it is Groves on Sunday, this year's Groves as opposed to last year's Groves. But yeah, I mean, I think we go to Omaha with this year's pitching staff and last year's offense and defense.
Johnny Gardner says in wrap up of the show, hated to hear the Mike Schwartz podcast pushed back to next week. Any idea when that now will drop? So right now we are scheduled for next Monday at 1, but honestly, with the baby likely to get here Thursday, Friday, I would say it's very much in the air. They had to postpone due to some recruiting stuff, so we'll see. It'll be kind of a moving date, but either way, we'll have him on soon. I know he's scheduled to do some stuff with Pirate Radio, also 94.3. So I think you'll hear from him next week either way, barring something. But they're, with the portal, with recruiting, they're kind of all over the place right now. So we'll get him on at some point this offseason. But yeah, of course, as soon as I put out the tweet, he'll join us. They rescheduled. That's how it usually goes. Frank says he thinks the bullpen would be the difference. And Brandon Carr says, nice shirt, Scott. Wags, not so much. Looks like your shirt says USF.
I guess it is kind of hard to see, but it does say USA baseball, but I definitely understand why you see that. So, yeah.
Let it be known, by the way, that one member of this podcast was in Boshemer Stadium at one point this weekend for a non-ECU game. Also, one member of this podcast was in NC State Stadium earlier this year for a non-ECU game. I am not either of those people.
Look, I'll defend myself here. I was in Boshemer Stadium on Friday night. It was a pre-planned trip with one of my friends who is a Carolina fan. And I didn't even grow up a Carolina baseball fan. I grew up a Carolina basketball fan. That was it. But now I don't care about Carolina basketball. I don't care about Carolina baseball, especially not compared to ECU baseball. It was a pre-planned trip. We always talk about the good baseball in the state of North Carolina. So, we wanted to go to that. We wanted to go to Durham. So it was a pre-planned trip. We planned it out to where it was on a weekend where ECU was not playing anything important. And no offense, George Mason, but you fit the bill. So it was pre-planned. We headed out there for a couple months. Roast me if you want to, but I'll take the blame, I guess.
I do have a question. Did you get the Bojangles at Boshemer Stadium?
I did not. I thought about it. It was right. I was sitting right in front of it. I know you guys have been telling me for weeks, but I did not make my way over there, unfortunately.
Oh man, that's just let it be known, Wags, that you enjoy the Boshemer Stadium atmosphere more than the jungle.
And didn't even get the Bojangles.
Hell no. The Boshemer Library, the fans, I was there on Friday, and nobody cheered the entire game. I was in the section next to the Duke families, which, first of all, Duke has fans, I guess, finally. And nobody from Carolina cheered that entire game until, I think, the 7th, 8th inning. And this one guy got in front of us, and he was screaming every pitch, and the Duke fans started mocking him. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I hate everyone here. But, yeah, nobody compares to the jungle. Nobody compares to ECU. The Boshemer Library is not even in the same discussion.
Frank says he almost threw up in his mouth about Orange County Community College. Philip says, don't let Scott fool you. He definitely grew up a UNC basketball fan as well. Thankfully, he has seen the error in his ways. What do you have to say for yourself, Scott?
Oh, Duke fan, Philip? Is that who we're talking about right now? Duke fan that I've heard say we about Duke basketball in the last year. Yeah, I'll see you at our next family event, Philip. That's what I'll have to say. No, I definitely did pull for UNC basketball as a child. But when I was a child, I thought as a child, I walked as a child, I talked as a child. And when I became a man, I put away childish things. So take that for what it's worth.
I feel like, unfortunately, with the way the UNC-Duke rivalry is, you almost have to choose a team as a child because a lot of people see it that way. But many people realize the foolishness once they arrive at the great East Carolina University. Josh does add that he saw Wags waiting after the game to get all the Carolina players to sign his glove.
So Josh was also there, apparently. So interesting.
He just brought himself down there with me, I guess.
Josh is actually a big Duke baseball fan. All right. Again, any questions, drop them. We'll wrap up the show like we always do, guys. Prediction time. Did we have 4-0 last week?
I went 4-0 because I wanted to say Pachycephalosaurus.
I think I went 3-1.
I went 3-1 with a loss to George Mason, so I'm a dumbass. I'm gonna. We got all right. So we got UNCW, then we got at Houston. I'll start it off this time, guys. Since I feel like I always go first or go last. So I'm going to a big win tomorrow. I think ECU wins big over UNCW, and then I got them winning the first two at Houston and falling on Sunday. So 3-1 week, 2 out of 3 at Houston. I don't know. I just have a feeling at Houston, different. Not the best team in the world, but I still think going across the country to play your first road weekend series will be easy. So I'm going 3-1. Scott, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, so one of the groomsmen in my wedding actually pitched at UNCW, so I think we win them, and I think we win by at least 10. I think we it's like a 12-2 type game. I think we really attack the ball, and we get a few balls that leave the yard. Then we go to Houston. You said Sunday you think we lose. I think their Sunday starter has actually been their most effective guy this year. They have a team ERA of 6.3. Yeah, I think we went all four. Because I don't think Houston can pitch well enough to keep us off the scoreboard. And if you're giving up 6 runs a game, I don't think between you Savage, Spivey, and Groves, anyone will have a bad enough outing to where 6 runs won't be enough. So, yeah, 4-0. We'll go 4-0.
All right, UNC fan, take us home.
Oh, hell no. But, okay, so for the second straight week, Scott's going to go 4-0. Igo and I are both going to go 3-1, just with differing losses. I think we're all in unison that a big win tomorrow night against UNCW. I agree with that. I think something I talked about earlier is I question if the offense is going to come out firing right away on the road. But Friday night, I think Trey Savage, I don't think it matters what you do on offense. You score a run, you might be good enough against Houston. So I think you win on Friday. I think you lose on Saturday. I think it's a low-scoring game, a 4-3 type of thing. But I do think ECU comes back on Sunday. The bats finally kind of find their groove, warm up, and Josh Croach pitches well again. So I'm going to go 3-1 with a loss on Saturday.
All right, there you have it. Johnny Robertson, I think he was trying to type this earlier. He says 169 left on base, 33 runs last year. And compared to this year, it's 203 left on base and 183 runs this year through 24 games. So interesting that ECU, according to his number, has scored 50 more runs at this point in the season. Do I have that right? Is that correct? I think so.
203 left on base is definitely right for this year.
Okay.
I don't know about the other numbers, but
I guess he tallied it all up on his own. But either way, good numbers there. It shows that ECU's offense much better this year early on than last year. Obviously, ECU took off in the second half last year due to the early struggles. Those numbers are down. All right, let's get out of here, guys. And again, Frank Durham says 4-0. Leslie Brooks says 4-0. So low expectations for the coming week for the Pirates. So next Monday night, more than likely, we will not be live. That said, we're going to try to go live. Frank says he's sorry. Is there a blizzard coming through Houston? We should wipe the floor with the Cougars. I mean, yeah, but it's still it's hard to go on the road and win 3 baseball games. It's just, especially when you're ranked number 8, you're going to get their best shot. That's my take on it. Obviously, ECU can sweep. We'll see if they will. All right, so next Monday, East Carolina, regardless of what the weekend is, we will probably not be live because I'll be raising a new child. And Jonathan and Scott will probably be with you in podcast form. So check us out on the Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast channel, and we'll have a show up that way. Hoping to get back the following Monday in mid-April, but we'll keep you guys updated. And what we'll probably do is either I will tweet out or we'll tweet out from the Hoisted Colors account asking for questions for the show. That way we can keep the interaction up. even though we're not live. But we will keep you guys posted on the live podcast. But either way, appreciate all the comments, questions, everything. Jonathan, Scott, thank you guys as always. And for Scott Lowerbatcher, for Jonathan Wagner, I am Stephen Igo. This has been the Hoist the Colors podcast. We will talk to you guys next time.